Hello, and welcome to Today in Sudoku for August 5th. This is Spectacular 17s, but I'm hearing we have some breaking news. Breaking news, the third key has been found. The third key has been found by red question mark, orange question mark, green question mark, blue question mark. On the YouTubes, we don't want to reveal the human identities of some of our solvers. The AI players or the corporate overlords may sort of do some nefarious things, at least looking at popular fiction. That's a worry we have. But the third key's been found, and 10,000 more paper clips are going to this solver at the top. That doesn't mean this solver is any closer to the doors, which are much harder. 100,000 paper clips for those, and then a final challenge, which gets you to the 1 million paperclip prize. We don't want to set this up as if you're taking it away from the National Alliance on Mental Illness or taking it away from StokuCon. For sure, if no one finds the prize, we're going to be donating the monies to those places by the end of the year. But if someone does find the prize, we'll either match it, or we may make the donation to another spot, or if someone wants to have a custom puzzle, or if someone wants cash, we'll put up some different ways you can use 1 million paper clips, including to get some distance from here to the moon. I don't think it's enough to get all the way to the moon, but we'll do that math so that people are aware of the moonshot, of why we're getting all these paper clips. So exciting news on the final boss, and congratulations again to red question mark, orange question mark, green question mark, blue question mark. Today is about spectacular 17s, and this is a spectacular S with 6 question marks after that puzzle. If you know Philip Newman, you may know the pattern that's behind this box. We're going to reveal this in about 5 seconds. This was a selected puzzle that was going to be just in the style of some of Philip's puzzles. This is indeed a spectacular sunrise. A few days ago, I was just making up an SS phrase, and I said spectacular sunrise, and then a few days later, I'm like, I can probably find a 17 given puzzle that would fit the description of a spectacular sunrise, and we think this is a really cool, look at the sun shape, it's really cool what numbers go in there. How the puzzle solves, challenging puzzle for sure. A lot of people don't talk about 17s because you can't claim human construction, but I think this is a place where you can definitely curate grids and tell stories through grids, even if they're not strictly your own. And we want to talk about, in general, 17 given puzzles and why that's the limit. And so we have some different people to thank for the content in this talk. Philip Newman's hard Sudoku talk, hard in quotation marks, like what is the meaning of hard, at SudokuCon in April was a really great place to revitalize my own interest in looking at this topic. The forum.enjoysudoku.com, which is where a lot of the old Sudoku.com posts went after Sudoku.com got repurchased maybe a second or third time. I don't know. Everyone wants that domain, and no one puts any good content on it. So this enjoy.sudoku.com has posts like scan solution grids for 17 clues as of blue. That's one place to go. And finally, McGuire et al., the paper, There is no 16-clue Sudoku, solving the Sudoku minimum number of clues problem by a hitting set enumeration. This was on arXiv in 2012 and then published in 2014. This is the proof, or a proof by computation, that there are no 16-clue Sudoku. And I wanted to give a little bit of a feel, without going deep into this, of the proof that there are no 16s. What is hitting set enumeration? That was the big phrase in their title, and this is a different kind of concept when you're looking at groups and things. I'm going to give the Sudoku form of this story, and this is an image from Philip's talk. I just borrowed it because it's easier to just grab than sort of remake, but for sure he did the hard work here. This is probably the minimum lexicographic Sudoku that can be out there. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at the top, then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, then 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then 2 with a 1, and then a 4 because you can't have a 3, then 3, can't have a 5, etc. So this is the lowest 81-digit string you can have. This is one of the 5 billion plus solutions. There are 5.472 billion solutions that are effectively different of Sudoku. I'm just going to color a few of the squares. Well, Philip colored these squares. I'm going to talk about a few of the squares that Philip colored. Look at these 4 cells in green. If you subtract numbers from this solution to get to a Sudoku puzzle, this is one way computer generators do it. Is they take 81 down to 80, down to 79, all the way beep, 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 down to 18, maybe 17, maybe 16. You eventually hit a limit where you've got a puzzle that still has this solution as the only solution and not more, not other solutions. You can't have a valid Sudoku with this solution if these 4 cells are empty. You need to have a 1 here, or a 2 here, or a 2 here, or a 1 here, or you're going to have this deadly pattern as some part of the solve. In the same way, in pink, we have a 6-cell pattern of problems. So 1, 3, 3, 5, 5, 1 can all change. In orange is actually a pattern which has 6 options. This at the top could be 7, 9, 8. This could be 8, 7, 9, 8, 9, 7. This could be 9, 7, 8, 9, 8, 7. All 6 of those would have values coming down that would allow this to work. And so you actually have not just 1, you need to have 2. I think it's at least 2. It might be 3 7, 9. I think if you do this 7 and this 9, then 1, do, those are all 4s. 9 is up here, here. At least 2 in this orange pattern to make it work. And there's a larger pattern with all the 4s and 6s, if you look across this grid, that all of those then also have an either or choice. So lots of different patterns. These aren't all the patterns, but the idea is when you're trying to make a 16 hitting set, could you make such a space where you're covering all such patterns, leaving behind a puzzle with unique answer? And so the McGuire et al. Made code to try to search through all the solutions to find 16 hitting set coverages. And I think that's the right terminology. Like, again, like I might have this slightly wrong, but it's this concept. They didn't find any, so they for sure proved that there were no 16s and that people had found 17s because there's none at 16 and there are at 17. 17 is the minimum number in classic Sudoku. But how many are there? This was the big question. The census of the 17s we're going to talk about for the next few slides. One of the first people doing a lot of work in this space was Gordon Royal, who found some of them and then tried to permute around the 17s he had to find others. He got to like 30,000, maybe even low 40,000s before other approaches were taken up. And people were adding in and submitting for his database. So sometimes people would do new searches, send them against Gordon's database, and then find that like 90% of the new ones they found already existed, but there were these that were new. And so this was a very slow path. And in 2019 was when 49,157 became 49,158 with the puzzle found by Blue. And then 3 years later, 2022, this was 17 years after the Sudoku fad, actually. So 17 years of looking, I guess, from when people in the Western world cared. 49,158 is the total number of essentially distinct Sudokus. These are Sudoku where if you change the numbers, rows, columns, they cannot map to each other. So essentially distinct allows for all those isomorphisms to not sort of add to this number in the same way the 5.4 billion Sudoku solutions are essentially distinct solutions. And this had a lot of work by Blue and Champagne and Mathemagics and some others to get to this state. I want to go to the most misunderstood thing about these 17s, and this is where I can always grade someone's sophistication in understanding statistics and distributions of objects and other things. If you just take a census of the 17s, should they look that different from a census of like 24 given Sudoku randomly found? My guess is maybe slightly skewed, but not too much. And so people say these must be the hardest puzzles. You got 64 numbers to write. Well, it turns out 40% of them use only hidden singles. That's not too hard. And if we go farther into direct hidden pairs and pointing pairs, about 80% of the puzzles are in these lowest bins in terms of how Sudoku Explainer would describe their ratings. And these would be Monday to Wednesday puzzles, typically, and how we'd think about them, medium at most in their difficulty. And the approximate steps that follow get a little trickier to follow, but because they have some different names and some other ones that are missing, and like remote pairs look harder this way than that way, but they're like a 4 or 5 or 6 strong link techniques, but they're the strong links with the same 2 numbers. And so like, I don't always like the numbers of Sudoku Explainer, but for sure it's the most standardized way to evaluate the difficulty. And this looks like just a long tail of a distribution, like out to strong link techniques that use 6 positions is about 2 deviations of all the puzzles. And if you add enforcing chains, the last 5% of puzzles, the last 2,400 or so puzzles come out there. Important to say that the hardest Sudoku in the world are above 10 in Sudoku Explainer rating. I think something around 11 is where the top is. I haven't looked back at that recently, but that's to say the hardest Sudoku is not a 17. And given there aren't as many, like there are millions to billions of Sudoku puzzles that are 18s, 19s, 20s, a 17 doesn't have to be the hardest. And in fact, they aren't the hardest, but they just have a distribution that looks across a lot of where the space of these puzzles are. And if you decide a forcing chain is or is not a logical step, maybe 5% of Sudoku in this category do not have a compelling human definable reason they occur to have one solution. So there's still a zone of knowledge to find if we think forcing chains, and I'm not trying to make this line be the line, like anything on this, I'm very happy with 80% of these and probably another 10%. And then we get to somewhere some but not all of these are well describable and others are very tough and really need brute force, and that's okay. That's just the reality of the space and the reality of the 49,158 objects that we can carefully analyze because there's a specific set of them. And another place that people ask, I said these were distinct puzzles. They don't all have distinct solutions. About 90% of them, 44,134, are unique in their solution, but the rest, the 5,024, have at least one partner, and as many as 29. There's a set of 29 that all share a solution. There's a set of 20 that share a solution. I should note if there were a valid 16, then there would be 65 in the largest set here, because that's in principle taking a 16 and adding a number to each of the 65 other positions, where if you removed that number, you'd have a 16 given puzzle. So it's a little under halfway to a 16 given puzzle, but it's on the precipice. And so one thing you might choose to do is look at this set. And this set was known pretty early on. This was identified by Gordon Royal. Again, if he was doing permutations around puzzles, he found this, what he called strangely familiar grid. Maybe he didn't call it. Eventually the community called it the strangely familiar grid, which had 29 with a shared solution. I wanted to visualize this for you. I'm not sure anyone's done it this way, but I felt this was an easy way for me to look at it. What I did is I colored all positions which are used in at least one of the puzzles, or in some cases all 29 of the puzzles, in different colors. In black are 14 positions which are absolutely conserved across all 29 17s. That's the 3 in the first row. You'll notice the answer to this puzzle is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. At the top, this has been canonicalized. It includes the 8s, the 1s, the 2s, a lot in the middle. Some of the structure of this puzzle, like 8 coming down to give an 8 in one of these cells, is in this grid, and sometimes the 7 helps, sometimes the 8's just given, but if the 8's given, then this 8 puts an 8 in that cell. Like, some of the structure of how this puzzle solves is conserved across almost all of the puzzles, including the fact that this number here is an 8, is true in all the puzzles just from the black numbers. You can prove that to yourself if you want to look for it. The reality, though, is there's something else that's interesting if you look not just at what's most conserved, if you look at what's least conserved. All of those answers use only 1 6 or only 1 9 and never both. And you do have to use 8 distinct numbers of the 9 possible numbers to have a valid Sudoku solution. Most of the positions you can see in the top row, this 6, this 9, the 6, this 9, this 9, this 6, all these solutions except this 6, this 9, and that 9, 3 of the positions are used in only one of the answers, and then the rest of the ones have a single 6 or 9 in these that are more visited. That's suggesting there's some weird structure happening around just that number. And again, identified by Gordon, but I'm just going to sort of bring this out again. This is a very intriguing 2-solution grid that's used in 18 of the puzzles. And it's used in 18 because it turns out this is a valid puzzle except for the 6s or the 9s, which are the 2 numbers that aren't represented here. So 16 givens actually places every single number except a 6 or a 9. And so just in the case of having a deadly pattern, a 6 here or a 9 here gives a single answer. But right now this has both those choices, and that's going to propagate around the grid in a very fascinating pattern. And so any one spot will fill in all of the 18 spots, but this does not have a single answer. But this is a case of a puzzle style that was talked about in the early days on Sudoku.com. I don't know if it's talked about anymore. Something called a 007 puzzle. This is a puzzle where you need to place the numbers 1 to 7 into some cells, so no digit repeats in any row, column, or region. 2 cells remain empty. You can choose to put zeros into them. We don't usually give zeros in this style. There used to be like a 007 killer. There are sort of other things in the style. Like, again, 007 was cool because of James Bond and all that stuff. But for me, this is structurally like the extra space puzzles I'm making now, except I don't need to shade in these cells to have the extra space constraint work. There's just extra room in these grids. And so I can say there's a 16 given 007 Sudoku style puzzle. There aren't going to be 15 givens. At least I would very much believe there aren't going to be 15 given 007 Sudoku puzzles. But this was found by looking at the 17 given ones. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this slightly deeper dive into the 17 Sudokus. This is a tricky series to keep putting on every day. We may go back to this week in Sudoku, but we hope that at least today you enjoyed the deeper dive and some of the stuff that came along with it. We already showed you today's shape, so just as our closing thoughts here, we're going to give you tomorrow's shape. It is the classic grid here. It is something that is an A and then 7 more question marks, so it's an 8-letter word that starts with an A, and it's from a new series that Thomas Snyder is going to be giving. I'm Thomas Snyder. It's a new series I'm going to be giving to Dr. Sudoku as prompts, and maybe to the audience as prompts with a 7-6. And so with that, thanks for listening, and have a great rest of your day.